Billy and Cade, we're coming here live. Well, not live, but we are live right now in our studio with a good friend, Joe Merrick. And we wanted to talk to him about his life and what he captured in the great book that he wrote called Once Upon the Mountain. I think if you haven't read that, you're going to want to go out and pick up a copy after you hear this interview. So, Joe, thanks for joining Cade and I today.
Thanks for having me, Billy. Cade, appreciate it, you guys.
You bet. You bet. We're grateful for you being here. You know, there's not a lot of the good old boys left, and I would consider you one of them.
Well, I
Who
appreciate that.
grew up pretty much around and on the racetrack. So many good stories that you shared in your book. And I read that cover to cover. You know, I just ate it up. I love stories with the racetrack, especially when they involve really, really fast horses. And of course, we're talking about EasyJet, one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time. So we're going to pick your brain about him and your experience in your life growing up around that horse with your dad. He was such a monumental figure in the horse industry and racing, and what he did to the breed and so many influential horses that were produced in that line. So Cade and I both read the book, and I got the book from Jeff Tebow,
Oh,
who
yeah.
had read it, and then he gave it to me to read, and then I gave it to Cade. So I've kind of passed it around, but we want to make sure people know how to get a copy of your book. As you can see, it's right there behind you, there on your bookshelf. I can see it right now.
I see those guys on Fox do that, so I prop mine up there too.
That's a smart marketing move right there, Joe. So, you know, I want to go back your first memories when you were a kid. You sound like you had a lot of responsibilities there growing up and taking care of things and horses. And tell us what life was like for you when you were a kid.
It's kind of funny because I get that now, and I didn't think a thing about it at the time. That's just how things were. We were always a pretty hands-on family operation, and from the time I was a little bitty kid, I wouldn't take no for an answer. I was going to be there, whatever was going on. I wanted to see it, and I think Dad finally gave up and decided if I was going to hang around, he better teach me to do something. So pretty soon, before I knew it, I was running the feed route or catching mares to be bred or whatever, and it was one of those things I kind of remember at the time. When I was 10 or 11, 12 years old, I didn't think there was anything I couldn't do. I just hadn't done it yet. And so I just go at it that way. And there was a lot of trial and error and a lot of error involved as well. And I hit the ground a lot, getting on mares I didn't know if were broke to ride or different things like that. But I'd do it until I figured it out. And Dad, he didn't put the brakes on me on anything. He just let me take whatever responsibility I would.
Sometimes I look back and wonder how I lived through some of the adventures and some of the things that I did.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I say all that with the knowledge that I probably wouldn't have let my kids do that at that age, and the things that I did then.
It's amazing how we find maybe a different reality or a perception on what's dangerous and what isn't. Because when we're living those moments, it doesn't seem like it feels like all that dangerous at all.
No,
You talk about riding EasyJet down through the gullies and running through the rivers and, just going all out, doing things that you didn't find at the time to be out of the normal at all.
Exactly. One of the coolest things about growing up with him and in that period of time was that we were always pretty busy in the cattle business too. And so there was a little bleed over from each side. Some of the hands that worked with the cattle deal broke the colts, and some of the horses that we end up taking to the track went to the pasture for a while before they got the flat saddle put on them. And I think everybody got better from it.
Mm. You talk a lot about being at the racetrack when you were a kid. I mean, I don't know that any kid would do what you did back then today. I mean, if I saw somebody with that kind of dedication, you'd want to give them a high five almost, because you slept outside the horse's stall. I mean, basically lived right there with the horse. What motivated you to do that?
Well, it was one of those things that as you read that book, and it's something that I always had grown up hearing about, and Dad sleeping in the shed row and different things like that. And of course, Benjamin was there the early part of that Colts career, and we always had somebody with him 24/7, just for the obvious reasons of anything can happen. And in those days, it was a little Wild West, and you didn't know somebody wasn't going to try to get to your horse. And there's any number of ways they could do it. Anything from actually harming him to throwing something in a feed tub or anything. And, you just had to be around, because honestly, that year and at that crop and at that time, it was fairly evident by the middle of the summer that you're going to have to go through him if you're going to win a race in the 2-year-old division. And so, there's some people around that at that time that we didn't know, wouldn't take a chance to get to him, or he could just get cast and get sick and not find him till morning. So we got to just make sure and cover our bases. And honestly, Billy, I was a kid enough that it was just fun, and I got to camp with the horses at night. It wasn't anything like any sacrifice I made. It was just, I was lucky to be there the way it seemed to me. So,
and it's a great story.
There was a story there in your book that the stall that EasyJet was assigned to, that the horse ended up dying that night, even though the EasyJet didn't end up in that stall. Do you think there was any sort of foul play, or?
We never did decide. I mean, it was just from a kid's point of view. I remember pushing through those people and getting up to that horse, and he was laying there half in and half out of that stall and still had a needle in his neck. And anyway, I was just glad we wasn't in there that night, for whatever reason. Dad said that Leo Wood told him that some horse had shipped in for the trials that had got sick, and that they had doctored through the night and couldn't save him. And more than likely that's what it was. But it wasn't Leo's horse. It was just he had heard about it from someone else. But either way, it was a scary thing, and I'm glad we had moved to a different shed row.
Oh, I can't imagine. That scene in the movie Casey's Shadow brings that all into perspective. If you watch that show, when they come in and they think they're getting to Casey's Shadow, the horse that's in the All-American fraternity, but they get to Casey's little pony.
Yeah.
And they drug the poor little pony, and he ends up dying. And it's sad to think that kind of thing could happen, but I'm sure that's why they put it in the movie, because it was pretty important, pretty big concern back in those days.
And I don't know how often it happened, but Dad had grown up and cut his teeth in the racing business at a time when anything went. And he matched Lena Valenti, Lena's bar's mother, in a race out in the Panhandle of Texas one day, and he said, I knew there wasn't any way they could beat her, but when they kicked it, my gate was wired shut. So he said I had to pay up. He said it wasn't like we had to, you can fist fight or you can do whatever you want to do, but you in those days you couldn't count on anything not happening. So we just always took the precaution to make sure that we had covered our bases, and that's part of the reason I stayed there. Like I said, another part is because I just wanted to be close to him as much as I could, and then just to be around in case he got sick or had trouble, then I could get word to somebody. I think about it now, and as I was writing the book, I did, and we didn't have cell phones. I would have had to run up the hill to the stable gate to call somebody, but we'd already had that figured out and knew how to do it. And
one of the things I noticed from the book is just the lifestyle of people, and I knew this growing up from my dad and my grandpa and people that I was around. Just, it was a tougher way of life. It was more, and you consider today, the lifestyle we live today is pretty soft, comparatively so. But that seemed to be the way not only you live, but how you handled the horses. Now you kind of dealt with things with the horses, because the horses had to be tough right alongside you.
I think that's right. That's the way I remember it, and I've been guilty of that for the 50 years I've trained. I coddle them too much, and I'm too careful with them about what excites them or and Dad just believed in overexposing them to everything he could. And he said, then it won't bother them when they I mean, obviously he's right, but besides the aspect of riding them in the pasture and stuff, they learn to carry weight when they're off balance and step in uneven ground and cross water. and keep going when they're tired. That's one of the things we don't think about much, but we go out there and train those horses. We got to hurry up and get done and get back and get another one. But if you're riding 1-2 hours a day, then, you know, for the first 30 days that he's in training, well, then he's a different horse than one that just got to go to the track 15 minutes every one of those days.
Right.
So,
Talking about your lifestyle, you know, you mentioned you guys made an honest living. You worked hard, and it became clear early on in his 2-year-old year that he was a special horse. So how much consideration went into the decision when he was offered a large sum of money to sell EasyJet?
well, we had sold him before, and it was sure enough hard sometimes to turn down that money, and there were a few times we did that we wished we hadn't, and a few times that it was the right thing to do. But it's one of those gut things that Dad just had to, you know, to decide at what level he was, you know, gonna take the money or keep the colt, and you know, those were prices nobody had been offered for a 2-year-old at that time, but at the same time, Dad could kind of read the tea leaves and see where the business was headed, and the All-American was going to get bigger every year, and colt prices were going to get bigger. And if this was a good horse that made a stud, then he'd be one that could help us for years to come. So he just decided to hang on to him, and we've held on to some since that we shouldn't have, but at least that time it worked out.
That one worked out. Yeah. The captivating, really interesting part for me in the book, and just going back to him and his 2-year-old campaign, was the fact that he ran it 22 times, I believe.
26. He won 22.
26, excuse me, 122. That's unheard of. That's unprecedented. You never see a horse these days. So, you know, you sometimes running just a couple of days apart and hauling him, you know, that just shows the stamina and just the ability to, like you said, keep going. That's an amazing accomplishment.
And if he hadn't have been the kind of horse he was, we wouldn't even have attempted it, I'm sure. But he was so durable and so naturally explosive and felt good all the time. And of course, he ate good. We took good care of him, kept his blood count good. But he just was one of those horses that seemed to be made of iron, and you couldn't pile up a lot of money in the races in those days unless you ran a lot of times. You know, it's not like it is now where the purses are so huge in those big races. So I think Ben Hudson did the figuring for me and said that in today's money, his 400 and some thousand would be 3.3 million or something compared to today's
inflation adjusted.
And that's just the dollar conversion. That doesn't take into account what the winner's share was on the All-American now versus back then.
Sure. Yeah.
And so,
no, amazing accomplishment, just what he did, and to keep going like he did, winning all the big ones just back to back. No one can beat him coming out like he did. And you guys hauling back and forth, and all the trips that you took to go watch him run, that had to be just such a neat experience as a boy.
I carried that story with me my whole life, and always wanted to tell it because I knew it had to, you know, have value to people to know, to have been inside that and see what it was like. And I'm happy that I finally did. I fought it back for years and finally decided I should just go ahead and get it done. And I about waited till everybody I could ask about it had already passed on, but I did get a chance to visit with Bubba Cassio and a few of those guys the year before they died, and talking about the book and stuff. It was fun because Bubba, he told me, he said, he said he was just a man among boys. He said you could see him prance out on that track and swish that tail, and he said you knew you were in trouble.
Yeah, that's something else. It's a great book. You know, it took, I'm sure, a while to put it all together. Did you have any consistent writing process each day, or did you have any goal to get it finished?
Well, thanks, Billy. I appreciate it. I didn't ever give myself a deadline because I'm terrible about that. I put things off anyway, and I just went to work on it. And it's funny because I've never written anything before other than the papers I had to write in school and a couple of letters and things for some of the work that I did. But it was a process, and I'd kind of think about it during the day as I was working, and how I might approach a certain topic. And I think the Lord helped me with it, because sometimes I wouldn't know where, how I was going to get from one topic to the other and make it make sense or bridge some gap that I knew was left in it with, and it just kind of started to flow. And before long, I just kind of gauged out the races that I wanted to talk about and a few things in the middle that I needed to tell to set the stage and let people know the climate in the world and in America and in our lives at the time, and try to blend it all into how things were in 1969 versus how they would be today.
And I think that's what's so special about the book, because it not only shares your life experiences and what you were going through and witnessing from the firsthand perspective, but also just what was life like in general. What were you thinking about? You know, you're talking about the moon landing and all the different things that were going on. I mean, in the world and the space shuttle, you know, just things that were affecting every person's life.
Right.
So, you know, you guys had a really interesting perspective on the way life was for a lot of Western families back then. I mean, I admire your dad. Just had a way about him, and I met him once, and I was honored to meet him. But it was just amazing what happened there.
Well, good. I'm glad you got to meet him.
Yeah. Neat story. Glad you were able to bring this into light, and I hope more people can come to read it. What horses today do you follow racing a lot? You still?
I try to keep up a little bit. I've been away from it some. I've trained it all my life, and in the last couple of decades, mostly thoroughbred horses. We've stayed home a little more, and raced at Remington and Canterbury and stuff with some thoroughbreds. We always ran both breeds in New Mexico. It was one of the few places that had mixed racing, and our breeding program was always based on fast thoroughbred mares on good quarter horse studs, and so we would go to Keeneland and buy good fillies that had speed lines in their pedigree and quarter horse conformation, and then bring them to New Mexico and race them a season or two, and then breed them when we had him to EasyJet and stuff. And we had good success with that over the years too. And so in the process of that, Dad just had me train the thoroughbreds while we were out there, and he'd train the quarter horses. And so whenever, as our deal evolved, and I wound up training a few more thoroughbreds than quarter horses when we came back home to Oklahoma and started racing more back here. But I still enjoy the quarter horses, and I've bred some of these faster thoroughbred fillies that I have now to horses like Dulce Sintacha and Cyber Monday and stuff. So
yeah,
I've got some nice fillies that I'm bringing along.
Now you live in Oklahoma or New Mexico now?
Live in Sayre, Oklahoma, western part of the state.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, I was just
Same
right
place.
there. I was just right out there this weekend for the Heritage Trials.
Oh yeah.
real
You
close
have to drive through here if you come from out west to go through
for
here.
sure. Yeah. I was curious, you obviously you told the story about the 2-year-old campaign. What was it like getting into standing him as a stud? How did that process look for you guys?
Well, there wasn't any change in it really. He at the end of his 2-year-old year, he bred 150 mares before he went back to the track as a 3-year-old.
Wow, really?
Holy cow.
Dad just started breeding him in February of his 3-year-old year, and he bred up until mid-May, and then we put him in training for about 3 or 4 weeks before we ran him the first time, and it showed. It took him a couple of races to get his wheels under him, but then he reeled off 7 or 8 in a row and was still champion 3-year-old once he got
after breeding 150 mares.
That's
he is the iron horse of the century. My goodness.
What did you start the stud fee at?
I think he started him at 2,500, and
Really?
that was quite a bit of money in those days, but it wasn't out of the reach. And Dad was careful. He took a different approach. We always heard about, and that's kind of the way they did Dash. They were really restrictive on how many mares he got and how the quality of the mares and stuff like that. But Dad was always the blue collar guy, and he wanted to make him available to everybody.
Yeah. And that's
it kind of paid out because he was one of those horses that could get a runner out of any kind of mare, and that was one of the things that made him a standout as a stallion. We bred a mare that Dad claimed or didn't claim. They crippled her in a $1,500 or a $2,500 claiming race at El Paso, and he told the old boy when we were leaving there after the racer that fall, that if she got where she could walk, he'd give him 1,500 for her. And so they brought her to the ranch about 6 weeks later, and we bred her and got Easy Date, and
Wow.
Easy Date was a champion filly that ran out 800 and some thousand and won the All-American.
All-American, yeah.
Tiny,
Yeah,
tiny,
James MacArthur, right?
right.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't the only one that came from a modest mare. He improved his mare so much, and he had so many physical attributes, the bone and the feet and just the toughness, and that just helped any mare. And then that thing you can't define, that speed and that heart.
Yeah, the
Mhm.
heart.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, just reading your book, I could tell how much of a giving person your dad was. I mean, even up to the end of the book when he just said, load up with us to the shoe shiner, and
Yeah.
brought him back, somebody that he didn't really know. I mean, you wouldn't find somebody like that today that would be willing to do that and bring somebody home to the ranch with family,
Load
wife,
up their
kids.
shoe shine stand and
Seems like a really stand-up guy.
Yeah.
So
hard to find them like that anymore.
We
Joe.
always had folks like that around, and I'd come down for breakfast a lot of times, and it'd be somebody sitting there I'd never seen before, and that's just the way those folks that came up through the Depression took care of each other.
Yeah.
And,
Right. My grandpa was like that way. You know, people would be off the side of the road, flat tire, a car breakdown. I remember being with him multiple times, and he'd pull over every time, and a lot of times take him home.
because he'd had to have it himself before. He needed it,
Yeah.
He knew what it was like, and that's the way Dad was. And he used to say that we're all just one stroke of bad luck from being just like them. You better help them out if you can.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, powerful stuff. What do you think about what's going on in racing today when we have all these problems and issues that are happening with the illegal substance abuse, drugs, and things like that? What do you think needs to happen, if anything? Can it be fixed?
It's tough, Billy. It's such a shame, and I guess if I was going to be honest with you, it's probably the reason that I stepped back from it as much as I have, and I love it and I hate it. Everybody asks me, why would you quit quarter horse racing after all the success you had? And I always told them I felt like maybe it had quit me because it just took a different turn back there. I don't know, 20 years ago, and then this is where it's wound up, and it's still the greatest thing going. And I love the people and I love the horses, and it just needs to be straightened up. And I really believe, and I may be way on the outside with this, and maybe nobody will ever speak to me again. It's not the horse's fault, but you have to rule the horses off when that happens, or nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
And it's not the trainers, it's not even the owners. But if somebody owns a horse, whether he's on paper or not, and he owns him, and he's the one that stands to gain from it, and all of a sudden that horse is worthless because he made a bad choice of who he gave him to or what he authorized, then he won't do that again.
Right.
And it'll hurt. It'll be a shame to lose some of those horses from the gene pool or those things. But until that's the risk, number one, we have to get to where we can determine what the substances are and how to eliminate the people that propagate it. And you and I probably both know that they know who those people are.
Sure.
Just get up and go fix it.
Yep.
And then once you've done that and you've identified what those substances are and how to detect them, then you have to draw a hard line, and it won't be on the trainer. You do that too. You have to do that too. But the big thing that'll stop it is when the horses are ruled off.
Yeah.
And then those people won't take that chance.
Right, because there's really no change when you just find the trainer or even suspend the trainer or ban the trainer for life.
Exactly.
They just move the horses to a different trainer, or a paper trainer, as they're so called today.
And they'll even do that with owners too. So
yeah. Yeah. So the beat goes on and the cheating
continues.
continues.
If the horse can't play anymore, and that horse that you were fixing to go win the All-American with, you can't find anybody to give him to because the horse himself is out of the picture, then it'll have to change. And I think more of the horses than I do most of the people. So I hate to say that, but I think that's how it's going to have to happen for it to have enough teeth in it to.
Yeah, it's not the horse's fault they were given something. I mean, they didn't choose that. It's
Exactly.
people that are handling them and choosing to do what they're doing.
And I don't know that would fix it, but I think that would be stronger and go further than the methods we've tried. What we're doing hasn't worked so far, so we have to try something else. And then we have to from a promotionary standpoint, just make sure that the general public out there understands what a good lifestyle and good story. And I got to grow up in a time, and so did you, when you couldn't have a better way to raise your kids than around the racetrack and the people that would help take care of them. And it's not that shady stuff didn't happen back then, but looking at it as compared to what they do now, there wasn't much to it. It was just more like, and in those days, you could have a good colt, and if you worked hard and were horseman enough, you could do some good with him. And I'm not sure that's true now.
Yeah, I think you're right on. I think there's a lot of things that are happening that are very suspect, and people are winning who might not have any horsemanship abilities. We kind of look at that, just shake our head a little bit. But, I love to see the stories where the right people come along and the right horse comes along. So, and, they win because they deserve it.
Exactly.
And that's what racing should be.
That's what we've got to get to again. That's right.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of good stories out there. I mean, all of us are warmed by the stories of like Secretariat or Seabiscuit or Easy Jet. That those are wonderful stories, and they need to be told. And boy, I hope somebody someday gets the inspiration to make a movie about a horse like Easy Jet, because I think that would be a big boom for our way of life and for the horse racing industry itself.
I think it would too. I've noticed that, well, just as a parallel, remember when they did the 8 Seconds movie on Lane Frost, there were 500 kids or more that got named Lane after that movie, and every kid wanted to be a bull rider for the next 10 years and stuff. And something like that comes along, and if they make a good movie and tell a good story, then maybe people will get interested in thinking about having a quarter horse again, especially if we do the steps necessary to make it a level playing field.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope that's where the industry is going. I hope we can take a look back in history to find out where we came from, the people that shaped the industry, like your dad, like yourself, the people that cared about the horses, that did the right by the horses. And that way we can take what we learned from them to make this industry rewarding, successful into the future.
Absolutely.
Bill, we sure appreciate you being on our show today. What a great book you wrote. How do people get a hold and find a copy of your book?
Well, on Facebook, I get put stuff on Facebook, and there's a couple of posts on there that have the link, and I'll have the link on there today. I'll put it up where they can just go to Joe Merrick on Facebook, and I'll have the link on there where they can hit it, and I'll give it to you guys, and maybe you can put it up too.
Sure, we'll put it on our show notes so we can definitely help promote it for you. Yeah, I understand the process. Writing a book is not an easy endeavor.
It sure isn't for a cowboy.
But it needed to be told. So congratulations. Bravo to you for telling the story. It needed to be told.
Well, thanks, Billy. I really appreciate it, Cade. Thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely,
thanks, Joe.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us, folks out there, for listening. Make sure you tune in next time, listen to the show notes, make comments, and look for Joe's book. You'll find it here on the show notes after this show. Take care, everybody.